Welcome to the congregation of Yahweh. We're here on Yahweh's Sabbath day. Greetings to those on the internet. We hope you enjoy the messages that go out, also those that are watching live on the internet. It's good to be with you today. Today's message is entitled Expressing Our Faith Using Biblical Terms. And what kind of encouraged me to discuss this today, first I want to start off with nobody's going to know your faith outside of this room until you share it with them. And somebody called me months ago in reference to the farm. They were calling, asking questions about the farm. We talked for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and he told me he'd get back with me in the spring. And recently he called again, and I mentioned the ministry, and immediately he shared with me some of his viewpoints. And we ended up talking on the phone for an hour and a half. And this discussion could have taken place 3 months ago if I would have shared with him where I stand. And when we go out in public, when people cross our paths, you never know when Yahweh put that person there for a reason, for a purpose, and you were called to say something, to do something. This morning, my wife and I were sitting. We were in a Bible study this morning. We actually went somewhere else for a Bible study this morning. And my wife started a conversation with the person. Well, the person happened to be a minister, and ended up having a good conversation with them, and they wanted to stay in touch, and they wanted to, support what we do. Right place, right time, and someone took the initiative to share. But also something I have found that is helpful to me, and it also provokes thought, provokes discussion, is define what you believe using biblical terms. And ask the person you're speaking with to define what they believe using only biblical terms, and that will open up a whole new realm of thought. So when somebody says, "What's your religion?" I want to use words in here. "What's your denomination?" I want to use words found in here. Well, and the reason I say that is when people ask you what your religion is, they want to put a label on you. What sect do you fit in? That way, immediately, by the way you answer the question, they pretty much know what you believe. And sometimes some people want to debate, they want to talk about certain viewpoints. But I have found, and this is for me personally, it might not work, and I might evolve into a different state of thinking, but for now, I only want to be defined and labeled as what the Bible calls me. I only want to be, I only want to believe words, phrases. Let me give you an example. A lot of people test you as a believer by saying, "Well, do you believe in the Trinity?" And I'll say, "Well, I don't know what your interpretation of the Trinity is, but yes, I do believe in the Father, the Son, and the Spirit." And there's, a big conflict as to what the interpretation of Trinity is. But being that Trinity is not a biblical term, I personally don't use it. I would like to get to the meat of the matter. Well, what is it? But I came up with a few questions that I want to mention, and then we'll touch on a few things in the scripture, things that I've come across and things that I like to address. One, which I already mentioned, what is your denomination? What is your religion? What do you believe? Well, who do you study with? Who do you fellowship with? What Bible translation do you use? That's a funny one. Some people believe that only the King James is the inspired version. If it's not King James, it's corrupt, it's tainted, whatever. And then, so anyway, that's just another label. I'm a King James only person type of person. That's me all the way. But they will actually label you by the Bible that you read, by the people you associate with. And once today, when I conversate with people, a lot of people want to, they'll say, "Well, are you Jewish? are you Christian? You sound like something in between. And, I want to define those terms as well. And then eventually we'll get to, oh, well, you can't keep the law. It's not possible. You can't keep the law. Or, oh, the law was a curse. The law was a curse. He took that curse from us. We're not under that curse anymore. Or, well, if you try to keep the law, you've fallen from grace. Your grace is no good if you try to keep the law. So we're going to touch on a few of those things. And the end result of this study is, and this, I guess, is speaking from my personal opinion, who I am, what my religion is, what I put my faith in, the only label that can be put on me, and then we'll address a few of those thought processes that come up when people actually find out that we're trying to walk in truth. We're trying to obey truth. When they hear that, the flesh don't like that. The flesh doesn't like to submit. When somebody asks, what is your religion? The word religion is only found a few times in the New Testament, and it's actually different Greek words. I want to touch on a few of those real quick. Acts chapter 25. Acts chapter 25 and verse 19. Now, this is when Paul is being brought before the judgment seat, and he's got many people trying to accuse him of different things, and he appeals to Caesar. And in 25:19, he's actually, let me back it up just a little bit. This is a letter that he was writing. Yeah, here it is. In verse, I'm back it up to 12, sorry. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, Hast thou appealed unto Caesar? Unto Caesar shalt thou go. And after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice came unto Caesarea to salute Festus. And when they had been there many days, Festus declared Paul's cause unto the king, saying, There is a certain man left in bonds by Felix, about whom when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to have judgment against him. To whom I answered, It is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die before that he which is accused have the accusers face to face, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him. Therefore, when they were come hither without any delay, on the morrow I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought forth. Against whom, when the accusers stood up, they brought none accusation of such things as I supposed, but had certain questions against him of their own religion. Now, some translations say superstition, and the word is actually used interchangeably. In a positive sense, it's religion. In a negative sense, it's superstition, and some people believe religion is a superstition. But here, he was in question as to the Messiah and the resurrection, and this actual translation, this says superstition. Another place where the word religion is used is in Acts chapter 26. Go over one chapter and verse 5. And this is Paul speaking for himself, and I guess I should back that up just a little bit for context. Starting in verse 2. I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because I shall answer for myself this day before thee, touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews, especially because I know thee to be expert in all customs and questions which are among the Jews, wherefore I beseech thee to hear me patiently. My manner of life from my youth, which was at the first among mine own nation at Jerusalem, know all the Jews, which knew me from the beginning, if they would testify that after the most straightest sect of our religion I lived a Pharisee. This word religion here is a mode of worship, especially external. And this is the way we modernly use the word religion. In Galatians chapter 1, there's only a few references to the word religion in the New Testament. Galatians chapter 1 and verse 13. For you have heard of my conversation in times past. Conversation there meaning behavior or mannerism. In time past in the Jews' religion. How that beyond measure I persecuted the assembly of Yahweh and wasted it. Now if we go back and read the story of Paul or Shaul in Acts, we will see that he got authority from the priests, and his zeal for his religion was to go out and punish these people, put them in prison. And this was his zeal in the Jews' religion. This word is also different. It is 2454 in the Greek, and it's Iudaismos, Judaism. That's the religion it's referring to there. And last reference is James chapter 1. The last reference of the word religion in the Messianic New Testament scriptures. 1 and 26. If any man among you seem to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this man's religion is vain. Pure religion and undefiled before Elohim and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. Now that's not a very broad definition of the word, but it is definition. Pure religion is to visit the fatherless and the widows, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. Well, how do you keep yourself unspotted from the world? That will define the rest of the definition of the word. Not doing what the world does. And I believe that his instructions tell us how to stay unspotted from the world. Now, a lot of people want to know, well, what's your denomination or your division? What branch do you come from? I want to touch on a few scriptures on that. There's a word sect in the New Testament. Sect is some that branch off with their own theology, their own doctrine, or it is a group of people that arises because of differences of opinions. That's the Strong's definition that you'll find for the word sect. Now I want to read a few of those real quick before I move on. Acts chapter 5. And verse 17, then the high priest rose up, and all they that were with him, which is the sect of the Sadducees, and were filled with indignation. That word sect is 139 in the Strong's Concordance. Flip over to chapter 15. Now, I'll just put a note. This is the sect of the Sadducees. In Acts chapter 15... and verse 5, but there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees, which believed, saying that it was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. Now this is a little off on a different topic, but while we're there, I just want to make a note of something. This says they were believing Pharisees. Very important to understand what was going on in Acts 15. But continue on, Acts chapter 24. Also in, starting verse 3. We accepted always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness, notwithstanding that I be not further tedious unto thee, I pray thee that thou wouldest hear us of thy clemency a few words. For we have found this man a pestilent fellow, and a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. So here, Paul is being accused of being a ringleader, a pestilent fellow, moving people to sedition, which is division, and he's a ringleader of this sect of the Nazarenes. Now, some believe that this Nazarene here is people who have chosen the Nazarite vow and have separated themselves to Yahweh. And a lot of people actually call themselves Nazarenes today because of this verse here. They believe that, and that's another thing. The term Christian. A lot of people say, "Well, are you a Christian? Or are you under Judaism?" And I just want to provoke some thought real quick. When you reading a book about cars, you usually see the word car all throughout the book. You're reading a book about computers, you'll see the word computer found all throughout the book. And then you have a compilation of books and letters, supposedly about the rise of Christianity under the new founder who started a new religion. And the word Christian is only there a few times, and it is not a compliment. People called them Christians. Paul said you could suffer for being one, but it was never a name they called themselves. Traditionally today, the term has become a coin of people that follow the Messiah, but in the first century, that was not something that they called themselves. In chapter 26 and verse 5, which knew me from the beginning. Oh, I read that earlier, but here he said that he was of the straightest sect of our religion. I lived as a Pharisee. Chapter 28 of Acts. Nope. I apologize. Apparently I wrote down the wrong note. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And verse 17. Now in this that I declare unto you, I praise you not, that you come together not for the better, but for the worse. For first of all, when you come together in the assembly, I hear that there be divisions among you, and I partly believe it. For there must be also heresies among you, that they which are approved may be made manifest among you. That word heresies is the same word for sect. There has to be sects among you, divisions, so that they which are approved be made manifest. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. And verse 10. Now I beseech you, brethren, by the name of the Master Yeshua Messiah, that you all speak the same thing, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment. For it hath been declared unto me of you, my brethren, by them which are of the house of Chloe, that there are contentions among you. Now this I say, that every one of you that saith, I am of Paul, and I of Apollos, and I of Cephas, and I of Messiah. Is Messiah divided? Was Paul impaled for you, or were you baptized in the name of Paul? When I read these sets of verses here, there's contention among them. There's division among them. Some are of Paul, some are of Apollos, some are of Cephas, some are of Messiah. Sounds like denomination to me. It sounds like division. It sounds like labels. Now, I'm not saying that identifying yourself, with a group is such a bad thing. I'm just saying it's not biblical, and I think it's much better to define your faith and who you are using biblical terms. What does the Bible say about you? Who are you? Who do you follow? Continue on to chapter 11 of 1 Corinthians and verse 18. For first of all, when you come together in the assembly, I hear that there be divisions among you, and I partly believe it. Oh, I just read that. Oh, I apologize. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. And I want to put a little note on this one verse in verse 2, and I'm going to revisit it a little later. It says, you know that you were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as you were led. He's talking to the congregation here, and he's saying that you used to be, past tense, you used to be Gentiles. Skip down to verse 12 of the same chapter. For as the body is one, and hath many members, and all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Messiah. For by one Spirit are we all baptized into one body, whether we be Jews or Gentiles, whether we be bond or free, and have been all made to drink into one Spirit. So no matter what background or bloodline or culture or ethnicity you come from, one body, with one Spirit, one people. And you'll see this theme repeated over and over throughout the Messianic scriptures. Get over the outward appearance and understand that we're all one in Him. Continuing on, the same chapter. I want to skip down just a little bit. Verse 24, for our comely parts have no need, but Elohim hath tempered the body together, having given more abundant honor to that part which lacked, that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one for another. That word schism is division. The body of Messiah is not divided. But you are the body of Messiah and members in particular. That's verse 27. Now I want to touch on a few of those verses I read earlier about the... Actually, I'm going to touch on those last. Let's go into our identification here. Romans chapter 11. And, of course, this is a very deep theological chapter. So I'm not going to cover the whole thing today, but I want to just touch on a few parts here. And starting in verse 17. And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou being a wild olive tree were grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree. Boast not against the branches, but if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Thou wouldst say then, the branches were broken off, that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off, and thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if Elohim spared not the natural branches, take heed, lest he also spare not thee. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of Elohim on them which fell severity, but towards thee goodness, if thou continue in his goodness. Otherwise, thou also shalt be cut off. And he goes on talking about this olive tree, but I just want to get to the point. What is this olive tree? What is the olive tree? So whether you remained on the tree, whether you were grafted into the tree, whether you were broken off and you could be grafted back in. Finding out who that olive tree is defines who we are as a people from a biblical perspective. If we continue on just to read the rest of the chapter, I'll skip to the answer of the question. That's in verse 26. And so all Israel shall be saved. Israel is the olive tree. And I do not want to be a branch that's broken off or severed from it. And to get a second witness on that, check out Jeremiah chapter 11 and verse 16. Yahweh called thy name a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit. With the noise of a great tumult he hath kindled fire upon it, and the branches of it are broken. For Yahweh of hosts that planted thee hath pronounced evil against thee for the evil of the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Israel and Judah were the olive tree. And most likely the reason Paul used that illustration was from Ezekiel 37, the two sticks coming together as one stick in your hand. And the Hebrew word for stick is tree in that particular set of verses. Also, another identifying mark that the mainstream so easily overlooks, Galatians chapter 3. And verse 27. Back it up to 26. Another identifying verse. For you are all the children of Yahweh by faith in Messiah Yeshua. We're Yahweh's children in the Messiah. That's who I am. You want to know who I am? I'm one of Yahweh's children. That's my denomination because the Bible says it. Let's continue on. For as many of you as have been baptized into Messiah have put on Messiah. That means to become clothed with him. That's another identifying mark. I'm clothed with the Messiah. Why? Because I strive to walk as he walked, in his footsteps. Walking as he walked doesn't mean the way he walked physically, his style of walking. It means to imitate him and do what he did. Well, what did he do? He obeyed his Father. That's why he said, obey me as I have obeyed my Father. The works and the words that I do are not my own, but his that sent me. So we walk as he walked. Continuing on. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Messiah Yeshua. Not 1,000 different divisions with their own interpretations. One. And what keeps us one is the standard that he set. His footsteps. Continuing on. And if you be Messiahs, then are you Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. The Bible said it. I am the seed of Abraham in the Messiah. That's who I am. That's how I'm identified in the Bible. Continuing on, Ephesians chapter 2. Very important chapter on understanding your identity in the Messiah. I would say one of the most important chapters to understand. Starting in verse 11. And this kind of ties in with the verse I put a note on back there in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 2. You were Gentiles. Chapter 2 verse 11 says, wherefore remember that you being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. Literally what he's saying here is you used to be Gentiles and the circumcised people called you uncircumcised. Verse 12 is going to tell us what state we were in when we used to be a Gentile. When you were a Gentile, at that time, you were without the Messiah, aliens from the commonwealth of Israel. Now that means citizenship. When you were a Gentile, you didn't have the Messiah and you did not have citizenship with Israel. You were a stranger from the covenants of promise. You had no hope and you were without Elohim in the world. When you were a Gentile, you were hopeless. You had no hope. Verse 14. For he is our peace, who hath made both one and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us. What is the both he's talking about here? Both Jew and Gentile. Two groups of people he has made into one by breaking down a dividing wall between the two. And if you want to know what that dividing wall was, you have to go back and read the vision of Peter in Acts. And I'll just get to the point. 3 unclean men were coming to Peter while he was having a vision 3 times of unclean beasts coming down. He came, the Spirit said, go with these men and don't doubt. The reason he was doubting because he knew he was not supposed to fellowship with these people. So he went to them and he said, you know it is an unlawful thing for me, being a Jew, to come in and associate with you people. But Yahweh has showed me that I should call no man unclean. That was the dividing wall. That was the partition between the two groups that made them into one. Continuing on in verse 15, restating what he just said in 14, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself of twain 2 groups into one new man, so making peace. And that he might reconcile both unto Elohim in one body by the stake, having slain the enmity thereby. And came and preached peace to you which were afar off, and to them which were nigh. For through him we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. Now, time reference. What we just read was when you were a Gentile and you didn't have hope and all that. But now that that wall has been absolved in the Messiah and 2 can come together. Now, let's read it. Now therefore, you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of Elohim, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Yeshua Messiah himself being the chief cornerstone, the head of the body. Now, we see that we're the children of Yahweh, we're the seed of Abraham, we are Israel. Now, how does that conflict with what they're teaching out there in the mainstream? In the mainstream, this Jesus guy started a new religion and did away with everything those poor Jews were in bondage to. It would be very hard for an Israelite who knew the scriptures, who was raised in it, who his parents taught their children and their children's children forever. If they knew their scriptures, it would be very hard to convert them to mainstream Christian doctrine. Because the things they're teaching in the churches today are an abomination to Yahweh, to his word, and to his people. And Deuteronomy 13 says if someone tries to draw you away from these commandments, they need to be stoned, and you need to get this evil out from the congregation. So anybody that knows these scriptures know that the Messiah would come with no new doctrine. Paul would come with no new doctrine, and it has to be in complete harmony with the word that has already been written. And if you don't interpret it that way, you have a man's interpretation. And it did not come from Yahweh. It is in harmony from Genesis to Revelations, and it does not conflict. Not one jot or tittle shall pass from the law till all things be fulfilled. And Luke says it's easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for one jot or tittle to pass from the law. Now, just want to touch on those last few statements that people hit all the time. I've had people come and visit and want to discuss the scriptures, and they have just a few threads of defense mechanisms with these verses that I discussed earlier. That's a curse. You're putting yourself under the curse. If you try to obey it, you're under a curse. Your grace means nothing. Let's go there to Galatians chapter 3. We're going to close out with these last few thoughts here and try to shed a little clarity on what he's really saying in these verses. Now, if we just go into some of the writings of Paul and pull out a little snippet, just a little piece of a verse here or a verse there, and don't read the context, we need to take heed to Peter's warning when he said that Paul's deep and hard to understand, and those that are unstable, they twist his writings to their own destruction, as they do the other scriptures. And he went on to say that those people are lawless. In Galatians chapter 3 and verse 13, Messiah has redeemed us from the curse of the law. Quick, close the book. And they'll convince you that the law was a curse, because they don't want to read the rest of it. And they're really not grasping what he's saying here. Messiah has redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. Well, let's find out where that's written. Let's go back to Deuteronomy chapter 21. And read verse 22. And if a man hath committed a sin worthy of death, and he be put to death, and thou shalt hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but thou shalt in any wise bury him that day. Where was the Messiah? Hung on a tree. Cursed is everyone that hangeth upon a tree. This curse of the law that we have been redeemed from was the curse of death. When you break the law was a blessing. It was designed to cause you to live long, to prosper, that the diseases of all the nations wouldn't come upon you, that your children would be blessed, your cattle would be blessed, your land would be blessed, and on and on and on. It was only for good. But it came with a price. It identified sin, and it brought the penalty for it. And he has redeemed us from the death penalty that we couldn't pay. Next verse. Why did he do that? Why did he do that? Next verse. That the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Yeshua Messiah, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. There's a lot of emphasis in Paul's ministry of the nations coming in. They were idolatrous. They did abominable things. And his message was, you can be one with Israel because of what Messiah has done. You got to stop doing these 4 things immediately, says Acts chapter 15. And you'll learn the rest from Moses on the Sabbath with Israel. But instead what we see today is this is a new religion, and Israel rejected their Messiah. So, Yahweh rejected them from being a people. That's called replacement theology. And if we read the rest of Scripture, we'll realize that Israel will always be the covenant people, will always exist. And as a matter of fact, Jeremiah says in 2 different places that he's going to cause all the nations to cease, except for Israel. Galatians chapter 5. Almost done here. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 4. This is another one of those defense verses here. Messiah is become of no effect unto you. Whosoever of you are justified by the law, you are fallen from grace. You start talking about feast days, Sabbaths, dietary laws, any type of obedience, that defense mechanism has already been implanted in their brains that you've fallen from grace. Well, there's a big confusion going on out there. There's a difference between obeying him with a heart of love or trying to earn your justification through him. It's very simple. You are saved by grace through faith, not of works. It's a free gift. It's grace. Just like Abraham was called. There's no reason why Abraham was called. Abraham was called by grace. Yahweh manifested himself to him by grace and showed him how to live. But what it's saying right here is if you're trying to earn it, then you're making your free gift of none effect. And a verse that goes very well with that is in Romans chapter 11. And we'll close out here. Romans chapter 11 and verse 6. Let me back it up to verse 5, sorry. Even so then, at this present time also there is a remnant according to the election of grace. And if by grace, then it is no more of works. If this gift comes by grace, it is no more of works. Otherwise, grace is no more grace. But if it be of works, then it is no more grace. Otherwise, work is no more work. We are, according to the Bible, we are Yahweh's seed. We imitate our Messiah. We strive to be obedient, not because we're trying to earn anything for him, but because we love him. And the scriptures we read says that the new covenant with his people is to give them a new spirit and a heart to obey his Torah that he puts in our minds. Hallelujah.